So a ton of new information has just been released about Concord, including the actual cost of the game, which is apparently about $400 million. Prior rough estimates were between 50 million to 150 million USD, so if this figure's accurate, then it's significantly worse. This also seems to make Concord Sony's largest failure ever. Amplifying that loss is that Concord apparently had the largest budget out of any Sony game that they've ever made to date, and that Sony even thought this could be their version of Star Wars, hoping to profit off Concord long into the future. That's just a quick summary of some of the new information presented by Colin Moriarty. In a clip he posted that's just over 8 minutes long. He'll go over some of this stuff in more detail and we'll also further talk about this, and then I have another source that I also want to show you too. Now that takes us to this tweet where Colin Moriarty says, "I spoke extensively with someone who worked on Concord, and it's so much worse than you think. It was internally referred to as the future of PlayStation, with Star Wars-like potential, and a dev culture of toxic positivity halted any negative feedback, making it cost $400 million. And now before I start playing what I view as some of the highlight areas of the clip, I've actually got a little more of a summary to go over, that being about the first 4 minutes of the clip, since I can just recap this pretty dang quick. But like I also mentioned, some of this we will break down in further detail. So the clip begins with him talking about this anonymous source of his, where he essentially says that someone who worked on Concord approached him and he spent a great amount of time checking and confirming that that person is who they say they are. After that, he goes on to talk about the financial situation and that $400 million figure as mentioned. It sounds like by 2023, around $200 million was already spent on Concord, and that was before Sony purchased Firewalk Studios. After Sony acquired Firewalk, they spent another $200 million on the game. All of that simply to get the game to minimum viability. It sounds like before Sony got involved, Firewalk was already a giant mess, doing who the heck knows what with the $200 million that they already had, because the game was apparently in a pathetic state. Although, of course, we already know how the end product also ended up being, but yeah. Okay, now with the first 4 minutes or so summarized, I'll let parts of the clip speak for itself.
The game cost about $400 million to make, soup to nuts. Sony put most of that money in, and it is not only so, because we had kind of said, like, this must be Sony's biggest loss ever on a game, and it is. It's the biggest game Sony's ever released from a budgetary standpoint from the first party or second party. So let that sink in.
It's crazy.
And it's totally unintuitive. There are games that are in development right now at Sony first and second party that are more expensive than this. But as of the games that have come out so far, so think about like Spider-Man 2 and so on and so forth. We know The Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million. Spider-Man 3 is going to cost about $350 million. This game costs more than that. And they lost all of it because they made no money. They made about $1 million gross revenue, and then they gave it all back. So this is a huge, multiple hundreds of millions of dollar loss.
So now skipping ahead, here's where he talks about that whole like Star Wars thing. Like Sony really thought this would be their Star Wars. They really thought they were going to make so much money for years and years off Concord. The situation was already amusing when we thought they spent like $50 to $150 million on this game. And it's just like astronomically worse than that.
The idea behind this was, and the term apparently verbatim had been used, that Concord is the future of PlayStation. That they had such major ambition for this game that it was referred to internally as a Star Wars-like project for Sony. That it can be repeatedly revisited over and over and over again, not only in cross-media, but in what we were seeing. We've already kind of seen little bits of it. So the weekly story vignettes that they were going to release, and then of course the inclusion in Amazon's Secret Levels anthology, that's like just scratching the surface of it. Ironically, the game was codenamed Chaos behind the scenes. And a major thing about the game is that there was, and I think we can kind of get this vibe from just the nature of the people making it and kind of the way the game reads and all that, a toxic positivity vibe. You weren't allowed to say anything, apparently internally, about this game.
Okay, let's pause again because that's absolutely hilarious. First of all, that in of itself is hilarious, but the way he phrased that too, like, I think we could kind of tell because of the sort of people that worked on the game. And it's like, yeah, no kidding. For example, look how some of them acted as soon as people started criticizing the game. We had that one Concord dev calling anyone who criticized the game, quote unquote, talentless freaks. Dude was like freaking out on their Twitter account, insulting people, and then going into protected mode. and even removing Concord from their own bio. Then there was that senior concept artist Amanda, who saw another artist criticizing the designs of Concord. And then Amanda was saying in this post, the character concept art team, including myself, is going through an extremely difficult time emotionally, and some on the team no longer want to work in games, design characters, or even do art anymore after this. Because of this, posts like yours, though understandable, are unfortunately ill-timed. None of us know which way the wind will blow at the studio. We're worried, sick, and terrified of the future. Not only that, but we have been shouldering the brunt of the emotional labor. Yeah, no, this whole thing that I read before, I don't want to repeat the entire thing. The point is, yeah, this whole toxic positivity thing at their company really checks out. These people acted like they never got criticism before, and then as soon as they got any, they displayed immense levels of unprofessionalism. Returning to the clip we left off here.
You weren't allowed to say anything, apparently internally, about this game. About how, like, something's wrong with it, character designs are not right, and so on and so forth. They really, truly believe this was Herman Hulst's baby, apparently. And he internally was himself a massive champion of the game. So it's not that. So the reason I'm telling you all of this, it's some interesting information, of course, but it's that I had said when people were like, Concord lost $200 million. Now, people were pulling that money out because that's basically how much, like, some of the first party games like Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, etc., kind of cost in that frame. And I was like, there's no way that it costs that much. I was saying, like, it cost 9 figures, probably, like low $100 million, but there's no way it cost $200 million. No, it cost $400 million. So, and I am totally solid on this source, by the way. So that's why I'm willing to share it with you. Because again, I'm not really a journalist. So yeah, the big things to take away: $400 million loss. The game was in horrible shape as of 18 months ago before release. Not even monetization, no onboarding, most content not even there. The game was in such bad shape at that point that they spent the budget of it again in urgent outsourcing to get the game finished from all of these different angles over an 18-month period. Internally, the game was considered part of the future of PlayStation with heavy cross-media references and a system of toxic positivity surrounding it that didn't allow anyone to meaningfully change the course of the game.
So well done, Colin, on getting all that information. And I now present to you a Kotaku journalist. I know, Kotaku, I know. But let's just see what he says here real quick. He says, I can corroborate the part about toxic positivity. Some sources I've spoken with blamed a head in the sand mentality carried over from the studio's Bungie roots. A sense the game would come together because the team was too good to fail. I'll have more next week. And also in Concord news, we had this. From GamesIndustry.biz, they say Concord director reportedly steps down, Firewalk fears layoffs. A quote from a former developer saying, Ryan deeply believed in that project and bringing players together through the joy in it. Regardless of there being things that he could have done differently throughout development, he's a good human and full of heart. They add, sources also claim that Firewalk staff are uncertain of the studio's future. Some reportedly believe that it could become a co-development studio on other Sony projects, while many have allegedly shared concerns of layoffs and a possible shutdown of the studio. In Concord's official statement regarding the shutdown of the game, they did technically imply that they might relaunch the game at some point in the future. Obviously, that already seemed highly unlikely, and it seems to only be getting even less probable. At least it's given all of us a lot of entertainment, and it's hopefully been a giant wake-up call for the greedy AAA industry. As for this segment, I'll leave it there. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Consider letting me know what you think about this stuff in the comments, and if you enjoyed my coverage, then also consider liking and or subscribing to the channel. Appreciate ya, and I'll see you in the next one.